So,
and now we hear the King's speech.
Yes.
No stuttering.
King Charles delivered a historic address to Congress yesterday in a moment used to highlight the 250 years of U.S.-UK relations and the importance of democracy. The King, now the second British monarch ever to address the chamber, reflected on the long and sometimes turbulent relationship between the two nations, emphasizing the partnership as one of the most consequential in history. He also called for continued support for Ukraine and praised NATO. Take a listen.
Today, I am here on this great occasion in the life of our nations to express the highest regard and friendship of the British people to the people of the United States. Ours is a partnership born out of dispute, but no less strong for it. We can discern that our nations are in fact instinctively like-minded, a product of the common democratic, legal and social traditions in which our governance is rooted to this day. Drawing on these values and traditions, time and again, our two countries have always found ways to come together. This, I believe, is the special ingredient in our relationship. As President Trump himself observed during his state visit to Britain last autumn, the bond of kinship and identity between America and the United Kingdom is priceless and eternal. It is irreplaceable and unbreakable. This year, of course, also marks the 25th anniversary of 9/11. This atrocity was a defining moment for America, and your pain and shock were felt around the whole world. During my visit to New York, my wife and I will again pay our respects to the victims, the families, and the bravery shown in the face of terrible loss. We stood with you then, and we stand with you now in solemn remembrance of a day that shall never be forgotten. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, when NATO invoked Article 5 for the first time, and the United Nations Security Council was united in the face of terror, we answered the call together, as our people have done so for more than a century, shoulder to shoulder, through 2 world wars, the Cold War, Afghanistan, and moments that have defined our shared security. Today, Mr. Speaker, that same unyielding resolve is needed for the defense of Ukraine and her most courageous people. From the depths of the Atlantic to the disastrously melting ice caps of the Arctic, the commitment and expertise of the United States Armed Forces and its allies lie at the heart of NATO, pledged to each other's defense, protecting our citizens and interests, keeping North Americans and Europeans safe from our common adversaries. The U.S. Supreme Court Historical Society has calculated that Magna Carta is cited in at least 160 Supreme Court cases since 1789, not least as the foundation of the principle that executive power is subject to checks and balances. I pray with all my heart that our alliance will continue to defend our shared values with our partners in Europe and the Commonwealth and across the world. And that we ignore the clarion calls to become ever more inward-looking.
You know, Kay, we discussed yesterday by phone the fact that my wife remained unmoved through the greater part of my hero, Queen Elizabeth II's extraordinary reign. Who would have ever known she would have fallen for the monarchy because of Charles? But that she did.
I did.
She made me replay the speech time and time again. First of all, and there are a lot of hardened Brits that I talked to yesterday afternoon who said Charles's speech was nothing short of extraordinary. After mocking this man throughout most of his adult life, I heard people saying, first of all, how courageous it was. He said things that most foreign leaders and politicians were afraid to say, bringing up Article 5, talking about checks and balances to a Republican Congress that forgot about checks and balances. But it really was. It was an extraordinary performance. And what was most extraordinary about it is, if you look at American polls, the majority of Americans support everything he said. The majority of Americans support Ukraine. 62% in the latest polls say keep helping and supporting the Ukrainians. The overwhelming majority of Americans support NATO. The overwhelming majority of Americans support the special relationship. And so these things that he brought up that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance may have been offended by, well, they're in the minority. Actually, King Charles III, what he said yesterday is what the majority of Americans feel. And I think that's what gives so much power to his speech, because Republicans, as Willie said, who are playing errand boy to one man, Republicans are scared to state the obvious. Yesterday, the King of England did just that.
Well, first of all, Mika, welcome to the Club of Monarchists. We'll give you a passport that doesn't have the face of the president on it. It's been remarkable to see all of Washington and to watch last night, Joe, in Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike stand and applaud things that normally Republicans would be pretty horrified by at the moment. I mean, the fact that they stood and cheered when he talked about the polar ice caps melting and protecting our planet and protecting nature. When he talked about those checks and balances, it wasn't just Democrats who stood up in Congress, it was Republicans as well. And part of me started thinking is, are they listening to what he's saying? Are they hearing what he's actually saying, which is, you were set up to do your job. You were set up to put checks and balances on the executive. I did think I saw J.D. Vance's face grow a little more scowly during the course of the speech, but generally it went down incredibly well. And you and I spoke afterwards. I thought it was more political than I expected it to be. I did think he would focus on NATO and the transatlantic alliance. I didn't necessarily expect him to bring up the British Navy, which Donald Trump has dismissed recently as a bunch of toy warships. I didn't expect him to bring up nature. Maybe I should have done as much as he did. And I did think that line of checks and balances and that closing line about America's words and actions matter, I think was another of his not particularly coded references to, listen, if you're going to go out there and trash all of your allies and do things like bomb Iran without allied support, you have to be careful because the rest of the world is watching. I thought he managed to pull off that amount. And I did check in with a few members who had been there, Republican and Democrat, and I kept getting all of these emojis back of crowns. One Republican did say to me that he enjoyed watching the Democrats stand repeatedly for a king. Look, King came and conquered Washington. Who knew? 250 years after he booted us out.
He did.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'll tell you, I didn't see this coming, and it's more the entire dynamic, Willie. He, throughout the day into the evening, was received really well. He used humor at times, but he cut to the truth, generating applause from Republicans, saying the things that needed to be said and getting applause from Republicans. And still carrying through. I mean, it was statesman, diplomat, and king all at once. And I think there has been a hunger for a person who can actually come to the table and say these things in the public sphere and be received in what is the normal way. And we got that.
Yeah, you almost saw, I don't know if it was relief or something from even Republican members of Congress that someone was saying these things out loud in that chamber, and then they could stand and applaud for it in a way they don't feel comfortable or too afraid to say themselves. But you're right. The masterful part about that day was that he was charming. He flattered President Trump in all the ways President Trump needs to be flattered. But embedded in all of that, those critiques that we just heard, David French, of isolationism, reminding President Trump and everyone in that room of the importance of NATO, of 9/11, checks and balances. I mean, the fact that he cited the Magna Carta, an 800-year-old document, as checks and balances and got Speaker Mike Johnson to leap to his feet, who has completely abdicated that role in the United States government. It was just an extraordinary thing to watch.
Well, you know, it was a masterclass in persuasion when you think about it, because what he did is he walks in and he expresses affection and also a degree of self-deprecating humor.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, when you walk into a room, a tough room perhaps, and you express affection, you're funny, you open people's minds, you open people's hearts. And then once their minds and hearts were open, he kind of had a tough message to deliver. Yeah. Something very unusual from a king now. This is a much more ceremonial position. This is not a substantive position the way that it used to be. But he came in and delivered a substantive message, one that I think the American people, not just many of them wanted to hear, but also needed to hear, and to show this transatlantic bond, it still exists, why it's so important. But he did it in a just almost a perfect way for the moment. People were hungry for this humor. People are hungry for like maybe a degree of dignity in public discourse. And I think he just really did rise to the occasion.
I mean, John, the Republicans on their feet for support of NATO, support of Ukraine, support of checks and balances, and climate change. That's the power of the king.
Yeah, not the Trump agenda. No, it was. The word was masterclass. Exactly right. He rose to the moment. He delivered. He exceeded expectations, I would think. And the reaction I heard from a few people yesterday was just, it was a rare return to normalcy.
Yeah.
That it was sort of like, this is the kind of speech that if a king came in, you know, whether it was Barack Obama's administration, Joe Biden, George W. Bush, or his father, they would have gotten this sort of reception. This is how it used to be. And I think for some, perhaps fleetingly, this was something that they were happy to have, even though somewhere George Washington is shaking his head. Jim VandeHei, I mean, this was remarkable to see Republicans in Congress, House, Senate alike, cheer some of these sentiments, which, as Willie just noted, run so contrary to what we hear from that party, from the White House over this last decade. You covered for Congress for a long time. Was this indeed, I assume this was just a fleeting moment in time, and today they'll be back to, doing the president's bidding. But perhaps, just perhaps, is it a sneak peek as to what it could be like post-Trump?
I think, sadly, it's probably fleeting. I don't mean to be a cynic. I think if someone uses humor, if someone uses levity, if someone has moral clarity, people respond to it. I think that's what you saw in those speeches yesterday. I thought the speech was both sad and delightful. It was sad in that, why did it take a king from a foreign land, from a country we fled, to remind people of what we've done and what we do and what we can do? And I think that's why it resonated, because he did speak to those things. And do I think Congress changes because of it? Absolutely not. But I do think, I've been picking this up talking to college kids and just talking to people around the country. There's something out there. Like the response to politics right now could be, we just go to the other side and we go to socialism or something like that. It also could be that it awakens this yearning, I think, that sits even inside of hardened members of Congress to do something with meaning, to have dignity, to be what the king talked about America being. And maybe that's a flicker of that, and it certainly did resonate. And I think it's very discordant when you do have Republicans standing up for things that they've been against. But it was a beautiful speech, like, regardless of what your politics are.
Jim, though, and I do agree. I think that what follows the Trump administration is going to be a return to respect, I think, for other people, for politicians more. I don't think it continues down there. There is an exhaustion, and there is an exhaustion even among my Trump-supporting friends who say, especially after Easter, they've said, we've just had enough of this. Can't he just be normal? That's what I keep hearing. Can't he just stop? Can't he just do his job? And so I think you're right. I think there's going to be an understanding, as there was in Hungary. There will be understanding. There's a reason we have institutions. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why we have people who are actually experts. There's a reason why we have people who study things their entire life. And when they tell you, you better not go into Iran, because if you go into Iran, then they're going to close the Strait of Hormuz, which experts have been saying since 1979, or, RFK Jr. Oh, I'm not a doctor or a scientist, and I don't know anything about what I'm talking about, but let me trot out this conspiracy theory. We're seeing the effects of all that, just like Hungarians saw it with Orban. And there's something else that lies underneath this, Jim. One of the reasons why the King's message was so receptive, and Republicans shouldn't fool themselves, they're not Republicans, MAGA people shouldn't fool themselves and say, oh, it's just because it was the King. No, it's because he touched upon things that most Americans believe in, but Republicans are afraid to say as they run Washington, D.C. 60% of Americans support NATO. 60% of Americans think America gets a lot out of NATO. 62% of Americans support the United States defending and fighting for Ukraine with economic support. 62%. We've talked about this before. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, the people who hate Ukraine, who prove every day that they hate Ukraine, who hate NATO, who prove every day that they hate NATO, who hate our European allies that helped us take down the Soviet Union, who prove that every day. They are on the wrong side of American history. And the overwhelming majority of Americans are against them. So let us hope post-Trump there's more of a Marco Rubio reset, who unfortunately has cowered at times on his long-held beliefs. But what the King was saying yesterday is what Republicans have always believed, but are now afraid to say because of Donald Trump.
I think I think you're right. I think that this is a great country full of good people. 60% of people or more agree on almost everything topically, and it just gets lost in politics. I'm going to use some Wisconsin slang to explain what I think is going on right now. I think people are waking up. It's like we went on a bender. Everybody drank too damn much, and now they're a little bit ashamed. They did things they didn't think they should do, and I think they want to sober up. And they want to think about, maybe I should be a little bit of a better person. Maybe I should show a little bit of self-restraint. And again, I think it's just a flicker, and polls aren't going to pick this up, and we're really not going to know for another year or two when we start to see the next political campaign kick off. But you're starting to see that. And I would encourage everyone, if you have any time, go listen to that extended version on 60 Minutes of Ben Sass's interview, and just listen to how he talks about community and how he talks about humanity. This is a guy who's dying, who's seen it all. He's been in politics. He might have a couple weeks, couple months left. He speaks so lyrically, so powerfully, so beautifully about what we could be and how close we are to being what we could be. And it's just such a beautiful reminder. Listen to that. Listen to that King speech. Turn off social media and get a life.